Hello everybody, I thought I'd give you a different angle of the studio today. Isn't that exciting for you? Today I want to do a really quick video actually, and I want to talk all about my Logic template in 2021. The reason I'm putting a date on it is because it changes all the time. I actually made some changes before making this video because I think the more you use the template, the more you streamline it and make it work better for you in the sessions that you do. Basically, what I'm using a template for is to make my song sound as good as possible, as soon as possible, with as little work as possible. Just before we get into this, if you haven't subscribed, 80% of people, 80% that watch my videos aren't subscribed to this channel. So click down there, subscribe. I'm doing 3 videos a week at the minute, and I think they're all genuinely pretty useful. And if you're doing music production or you're just getting into it, then there's definitely going to be stuff on this channel that would be useful for you, I hope. And if you want to see any videos, just drop a message down in the comments below and I'll make sure to get round to it. Okay, cool. Shall we check out this Logic template then? So in this video, I'm going to talk about why I set the template up the way I did, how it works, the different plugins I've got going on, and the different routing I've got going on, or routing, I guess, if you're to the side of the pond. Anyway, here's my Logic project for 2021. As you can see, I spent a lot of time color coding it. As you can see, I've got all my main groups already set up, and I'm going to explain the routing of all these in a minute. The first thing in my template that I'd recommend doing, that I think is really important, is changing this bar at the top from, I think it's Beats and Project by default. Change that to a custom one. So I've got the bar at the bottom, I've got the time in the song, which is good if you're doing podcasting or voiceovers, the tempo, obviously the time signature, and also I've got Midi data here so I can see what notes I'm playing, what chords, and then I've also made sure low latency mode is already open. You do that by right clicking here, customize control bar and display, and then low latency mode. I'm not going to dive deep into the customization on the settings side of things, and we're going to focus on the setup of the template. Starting with my vocals, vocal chain, vocal bus, vocal layout. So what I've set up here is 3 groups. These are summing stacks, so these are buses basically. And in these groups, I've got the normal parts I will record for a vocal. This isn't set in stone. Obviously, I can add more and they'll all link up here. And then each of these buses has processing on, which is, my vocal chain that I'm using at the minute. There is already a video on that, as I say, so go check out the channel to see how I make vocal chains. And each of these are processed how I do that part. So the doubles and harmonies isn't processed as hard as the lead. These 3 buses all output down here to my main vocal bus, which is here. And this ties all 3 of these groups together with just a little bit of EQ, a little bit of compression, and then I've also got this Acme Opticom on here, just to give it a little bit of saturation, just a nice bit of color. But I often turn this to slow, which just makes it into a nice light compressor rather than the coloration, just depends. So the vocal bus is squashing these 3 parts together. In the doubles I have set up already, all of the doubles I tend to do. I've done a video on my double setup as well. All the panning is already done, so I don't need to worry about any of that. And on my harmonies, I've just set up left and rights for 3 harmonies, but obviously I can always just duplicate and add more if I need to. So that's the vocal setup here. It's pretty standard. On the lead vocal, I've also sent this to different buses. We're going to look at the buses in a minute that I've set up. This is already routed to all the places I'd want a lead vocal to go, and obviously I can always add more. But the advantage of this is if we've got the song in and we want to do vocals, I can click here, click record, and then we're away. It sounds great straight in. I don't need to think about setting up a vocal chain or routing reverbs or anything like that. It just works and it sounds really, really good. Okay, so next is my guitar bus. So if we open the folder here, these are obviously color coordinated as well. I've got an acoustic guitar tracking track, which is just a blank track with an acoustic guitar icon. And then I've also got a guitar tracking track here, which is sort of started with this Acme Opticom. This is something that I'm really loving at the minute, and I got tipped off to, but actually it's a Mike Crossy trick on guitars. This just sounds fantastic on pop guitars, on clean guitars, also on distorted guitars, but particularly in bringing out nice, clean sounding electrics. So I DI into the Acme Opticom and then straight into Helix Native with my Fender Twin patch that I made. So that means as soon as I plug my guitar in and click on this patch, it's gonna sound really good, nice and compressed, really poppy, and I can just go away and track immediately and it'll sound fantastic. Also, you might notice that these pan handles, if you like, I don't know the technical term, have sort of a weird looking pan on them. You're probably used to seeing it like this. This is something I learned recently. In Logic, if you pan left or right like this, then actually it's not panning your signal, it's just turning down the side that you're panning away from. So if I pan all the way to the left, it's just turning down the right channel. So if you right click on a stereo track down here or in the mixer, I hit X there to open the mixer, then you can turn it from a balance pan to a stereo pan, and now when you pan, it's going to pan properly. It's going to pan that whole sound left and right. So make sure that all of your stereo tracks, you know it's stereo if it's got 2 circles, if it's mono if it's got 1 circle, are stereo pan. Cool, so that's the guitar tracks, and they're just going into a bus with a little bit of bus compression and a little bit of saturation on there. Next we've got the instrument bus. This is super simple. I just keep an upright piano on here, just ready to go out of the box. Because most songs that I work on have a piano and a guitar at the start. That's kind of how we write the song most of the time. So I have a really nice piano sound just preset in there. So the piano's set up. Below that are just other instruments. What I'd usually put in here is real instrument sounds. So if I was to use an organ, or if I was to use a xylophone or whatever, that's going to go in the instrument bus column, just because I like to process real instruments like real instruments, not like synths, and it's a very different kind of approach. I usually make them sound like they're in a room or like in a real space, and it makes them sound a lot more organic. On the bus, the instrument bus here, we've just got the same bus compressor, the same bus saturation, and then this Mkii Eq, which is adding a little bit of air up at the top. Next we have the synths bus. You're probably getting the idea by now. So in here we have a Serum preset already set up. I think it's just the saw preset. Yep. On the bus, it's another townhouse compressor, and then I've used a capitator on this on the Neve preset. I just think it sounds a little bit cleaner. Next is something a little bit clever. I actually quite like this. I stole this from a friend's template. I have a vocoder bus that's really small because you don't use it all the time. So actually this is already routed. So the vocoder MIDI one is routed to vocoder audio one. So as soon as I drop the audio in here, you're going to get a nice vocoder sound here. And then this vocoder bus is outputting to the synth bus. So it's not going straight out, it's going to the synths, and then it's being compressed in with them. Next, we've got my bass bus. Now bass is a bit of a weird one because you obviously get real bass, but also a lot of synth bass going on in most songs these days. So on the bass synth, it's blank. The sub bass, it's just like a kind of default sub sound. And then on the bass guitar patch, similar to the guitar bus patch, I have Helix Native with my bass patch set up, and Acme Opticom as well to give you that compression on the way in. So that's all being sent to this bass bus here, and on the bass bus, same again, bit of compression, bit of saturation, just to mix them in, tame them, and then send them to the master bus. So on these, I'm actually sending them using this output button. So usually it'd be output stereo out. I'm doing output to bus, and then I'm sending them to my bass bus, like that. Cool. Finally, on the main bits, we've got my drum bus. Now, people are pretty protective about the drum bus because drums are really important. In here, I've spent quite some time labeling all the different instruments I tend to have. These are like basically EQ'd. So like sub kick is EQ'd at the top end, top kick is EQ'd at the low end, snares have got no low end, hats have got no low end. And then on the drum kit, I've already set it up with probably like modern kit. What have I got on here? Modern drummer, yeah, so this is just like the Contact default drum kit. On the drum bus then, we've got the same compressor, then we're going into the same saturation. After the saturation, we're going into some stereo widening, just a little bit. On the Mag, we're setting a little bit pump in the sub and a little bit push on the 10K for that air knob. Finally, we're going into a FabFilter L2. This enables me to monitor how much the saturation's doing. The final 2 sections of this are just an FX folder, no processing, and then finally a miscellaneous folder for like if I wanted to use like, I don't know, any outdoor recordings on my voice notes or anything that wouldn't fit into any of these categories just goes into miscellaneous. On my master bus, I've set it up to basically brighten the sound of the track, make it sound fuller, and then push it through compression to make it really pump. So basically out of my production project, you're going to be getting a pretty nicely mastered song. I mean, obviously not actually mastered, but it's going to sound loud and it's going to sound punchy, and that's kind of what you want from most demos. So we're starting with a Mag again. We're pushing a little bit of the air, not much, just one this time. Then we're going into this Pultec Eq. I've actually turned this down. It's on the full and bright setting, but I've turned this down on the brightness here. I think it's on 4. I just turn it down to like 2 or 3 usually. It gets a little bit harsh else. But I was turning on this on YouTube from some Mix with the Masters videos, and honestly, turning this on and off on my master chain is ridiculous. It makes a monumental difference. Then we're going into some more saturation. This is, honestly, usually I turn this way down. This is pretty high right now. Then we've got some very light compression doing like 1 or 2 dBs into a shadow hills compressor, and then we're going into another limiter just to make sure that I'm not clipping anywhere and it's on safe mode here. Finally, which is something I always forget to turn off but should be turning off, we're going into SonarWorks. So I use SonarWorks to adjust my speakers because they get pretty nasty in this room if I don't. That's my speakers without correction, and then this is my speakers with correction. They're not perfect, but they're a lot better. If we go into my mix view here, we can see all the buses that I've got set up for effects. So the way I've set this up is all my effects buses are 1 to 32, and then 33 to 64 is where like my groups are. I just like how organized that is, to be honest with you, and it keeps them from popping up here. Here I've got a room reverb, very standard room reverb, probably Valhalla room, right? Yeah, and then I've got a Valhalla hall reverb, and then a plate reverb. So I've got options for reverb straight away, and then I have a massive reverb using vintage verb at 5 seconds, I think. Then we go into the 80s verb. I've got a drum reverb, which I think is a small room, and then a bigger room, maybe a plate, I can't remember, setup. These can change depending on the project, obviously. Next we go into delays. I have an 8th delay, which I put on all of my vocals. It ties them into the track nicely. And then I've got 2 options for vocal delays. One's pretty standard, one's a little bit funkier. And then I have a slap back delay, which adds a lot of depth and thickness to vocals. Next I have 2 options for chorus, for widening. I've got saturation set up if I want to send stuff to get like proper crunched. And then 3 effects buses just ready to go if I want to use any other effects that I haven't included yet. Then I have a vocal parallel compressor here, and then I also have a drum parallel compressor here, which I can add to my drum bus if I need to. But the drum bus is pretty pumping already, so I tend not to use this so much. Anyway, I think that's my whole template, guys. If you've got any questions about it, please let me know, and I'll make sure I do another video explaining exactly what it is you want to know about it. I basically designed this template to save me as much time as possible, make things sound as good as possible with as little effort, as you can probably see. If there's any other videos you want to see, please let me know down in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.